Hey everyone, my name is Lacey. I am the dietitian and a cycling coach here at FasCat Coaching. In my last nutrition related video, we talked about what to eat before your ride. So today we're going to build upon that and we're going to talk about what to eat during your ride, including what to eat, how much, and how often in order to optimize your performance. So without further ado, let's just jump right on in and talk about what the focus of your fueling plan should be. And that is carbohydrates, water, and electrolytes. So first, let's talk about my favorite topic, which is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are going to be your muscle's preferred source of energy during exercise and what you're burning the most of. They're also the easiest to digest, so they're really crucial for you to consume when you're doing high intensities. Now, the amount and type of carbohydrates you're going to need depends upon the duration and intensity of your exercise. So I've created this chart right here that kind of breaks down the amount of carbs you need based on the duration. And as you can see, for rides that are about 1 to 2 hours long, athletes should aim for around 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. When that intensity is low, like say you're doing an endurance-based ride, you're perfectly fine reaching for, say, like a stroopwafel. These are made by Goo. They're really good. A PB&J, some homemade baked goods. Any of these are usually tolerated well at lower intensities. Now, say you're doing a 2-hour sweet spot session or some threshold intervals, you're probably not going to want solid food, and you're going to want to reach for things such as like Goo Chews or like a Goo Gel or their liquid energy, which I'm a big fan of because they're not super concentrated. These are going to be easier to digest, and you're not going to be left feeling like you have a brick in your stomach when you're trying to throw down the watts. Now, once we get to rides that are longer than 2 hours, athletes are going to need anywhere between 60 to 90 grams an hour, and sometimes athletes can do better if they're doing like ultra endurance events, can do better with 120 grams per hour, but more on that later. And when you're doing this long of training, this is when like the source of carbohydrates is really going to start to matter. You see, all carbs are made of simple sugars, the main two being glucose and fructose. These sugars are absorbed in your small intestine by two different transporters. The one for glucose can absorb around 60 grams an hour, whereas the one for fructose can only absorb up to 30 grams an hour. But if we combine that, that gives you a total of 9 grams an hour that you can absorb. So when we're aiming for these higher amounts of carbohydrates, it's important to focus on consuming carbs that contain around a 2-to-1 ratio of glucose to fructose. Now, don't worry, this is actually pretty easy because most sports nutrition products these days contain that 2-to-1 ratio. For example, right here, this is a Goo Gel wrapper. And as you can see, the first ingredient is maltodextrin. Maltodextrin is basically just a chain of glucose molecules linked together. So the main ingredient here is glucose, and then you see fructose is right below it. So that means that there's more glucose than fructose in here, so we're getting that 2-to-1 ratio. Now, back to that 120 grams that I was talking about earlier. Not many athletes can absorb 120 grams of carbs per hour, though it is possible, and if they can, it's beneficial for their performance. For example, Gardner, who holds the Everstring record right now, he consumed 120 grams of carbs per hour on average for 7 hours. Y'all, that's like equivalent to, I think, 42 Goo Gels. Like, that's insane. It almost makes me wonder, like, what is Phil going to eat when he tries to attempt the Everstring record again? I don't know. Phil, if you're watching this, hit me up and let me know. But yeah, so just because you can, or that some people can achieve these high intakes, doesn't mean that you should. You need to find what works best for you. So now that we've covered carbs, let's talk about hydration. Hydration is probably one of the most variable things when it comes to your fueling strategy. And that's because it depends upon whether you're male or female, how long you're riding, how hydrated you are before you start, how hot it is outside. All these things are going to impact your fluid needs. But in general, in moderate temperature environments, males need around 20 to 36 ounces of water per hour, and females need around 14 to 30 ounces. The reason for that difference is because females have a lower plasma volume than males. Now, like I said before, this is super variable, so I always encourage athletes to do a sweat rate test at least a couple times a year. So maybe do one indoors if you train indoors, do one in the middle of summer, do one in the dead of winter, and then maybe one in the spring right before race season starts up. To do this, or to do a sweat test, it's actually pretty simple. All the athlete needs to do is to weigh themselves without their clothes on before they train, measure exactly how much fluid they take in while they're training, and then to weigh themselves immediately upon returning, again, without their clothes on. They then take the difference between their pre-ride weight and their post-ride weight and add that to how much fluid they consumed, and then divide that by the amount of time that they are riding, and that will tell them how much fluid they need per hour to offset losses. Now, I said it was easy, and I know you're probably thinking, Lacey, that just confused me, because it confuses me just trying to say it out loud. So let's do a little example here. Note that this is going to be using pounds and ounces. So if you're using the metric system, check out the link below. I will leave a document or link to a document that will have all of these charts that I've been referring to, as well as this example using the metric system. So let's say you're a 160-pound athlete and it's the dead of summer. You're about to go out for a 2-hour ride. And you weigh yourself before, again, you weigh 160 pounds, and you go train, you consume 28 ounces of water in that 2 hours. You come back home, weigh yourself, you're 158 pounds. That is a 2-pound difference, and for every pound, there's 16 ounces, so 2 pounds equates to 32 ounces. So we take that and add it to the 28 ounces that they consumed during the ride, and we get 60 ounces. Divide that by 2, and that means that they should have been consuming 30 ounces of water in order to offset fluid losses in the environment that they were training in. Now, unfortunately, I see all too often athletes not take into consideration how big of an impact that 2-pound weight loss has on their performance. You see, even 1 to 2% loss of total body water will result in decreased performance. So it really behooves you to figure out how your body responds to different environments and how much your fluid needs are in those environments so that you can perform at your best. Because nobody wants to be at the end of a 3-hour race with someone the same FTP as them and lose the race or lose the sprint finish because they didn't hydrate well and the other person did. So make sure you're drinking enough water, guys. Now, on to the last topic for today, which is electrolytes. When I say electrolytes, I really mean sodium. Sodium is the primary electrolyte you're losing through your sweat. It is also extremely important for fluid retention as well as the absorption of glucose. So think of glucose and sodium as these two guys right here. They don't go anywhere together, or they don't go anywhere without each other. So if you want glucose to get into your bloodstream and make its way to your muscles faster so you can ride for longer and harder, you want to have sodium in your fueling plan. Now, if you are training in cold environments, you're not going to be sweating as much. So you can usually get by or be just fine with consuming foods that contain sodium. So say pretzels or, even stroopwafel. This has, I think, like 125 milligrams of sodium. And then goo gels have some in there too. However, if you're going to be in hotter environments, so say you're doing like the Leadville 100 and it's like 80 degrees outside, you're going to need a lot more sodium than you would in a colder environment. And when that's the case, you want to add electrolytes or sodium into your bottles. So for example, Goo Roctane is a great choice. I keep mentioning the Goo Roctane, y'all. They do sponsor FasCat, but I used Goo Roctane way before I joined FasCat. So anyways, that contains 320 milligrams of sodium. You really want to aim for around 300 to 500 milligrams per bottle. And most products have that. Now, this is in addition, again, to what you're going to be eating. And if you find that you're a heavy sweater, so say you come home and you have salt in your face, you rub your face and it feels like you have an exfoliator on, or you see the salt on your bib shorts, this is an indication you need more sodium than most people. And if you're that person, I would encourage you to carry some electrolyte capsules with you. Those are going to be great towards the end of those big rides to make sure you're staying on top of your sodium and retaining all the water that you are consuming. You can also opt for goos like Roctane gels, because these are going to contain on average about twice as much sodium as their traditional gels. So for example, this is 125 milligrams of sodium, whereas this one is 65 milligrams of sodium. So that's a good way to get ahead of your sodium, or to stay on top of your sodium. The final thing that I want to touch on is using the drink mixes again, like we were just talking about it, but every individual is different. This is like a huge theme here. Everybody's different. Nutrition is like a science. You're the artist. You got to paint your picture. So every athlete is different on how much carbs they can tolerate inside of their bottles. Most males can tolerate around a 10% carbohydrate solution. So here I go with the Roctane again. Following the instructions for the Roctane, you do 2 scoops per 21 ounces, and that comes out to be right at around 10%. Now, females in general don't tolerate as much. They do better with around 3 to 6% carbohydrate solutions. So they can just take 1 scoop of the Roctane and put in 16 ounces or a 16-ounce water bottle, and that's about 6% carbohydrates. Again, I'm going to keep saying it, everybody's different. So really test out what works for you. Change one thing at a time and see how you feel. If you're a newer rider, start out with 20 grams an hour and then slowly work yourself up work your way up until you find that point where you can't take it anymore. And then keep practicing that and use that during race day. Don't try anything new during race day. You want to know exactly what works. So that's going to be it for today. I've done a lot of rambling. I said I was going to keep it short and sweet, but there's so much to cover and I'm sure I missed some things. So if you have any questions I didn't answer, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'm more than happy to answer them. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great one and go ride your bike. See you next time.